to be part of this organization and to be in this place and to have the opportunity to speak to you. I think that this is one of the most intimidating environments in which I have ever been in my entire life. I already told Pamela there that if I faint to just continue on with my speech, forgive me. I do come from Nicaragua, so we have a sense of intimidation about the US, you know, that we inherit. Oh, thank you very much. In order for me to tackle the question of feminism and diversity, there are a few aspects I must bring to our attention that will allow us to put into perspective different elements that identify the characteristics of indigenous feminism. First of all, the critical understanding of the relationship between cultural rights and cultural diversity. The second element is the difference between our understanding of the culture of feminism and the theory of feminism. The third element is the existent tension between intercultural and multicultural policies and practices. And the fourth element are current and defining characteristics of intercultural feminism, and those ones that I consider the characteristic of a young indigenous feminist. And lastly, what constitutes an intercultural and plurinational state, and the result of the exercise of this new cultural society. Culture takes form in the ways of life, in the value systems, in tradition, in beliefs of people. Today, a number of efforts have been made to promote and protect the cultural diversity of people, but we continue to face a number of challenges. First of all, having the capacity to be creative within each culture. And second, to guarantee peaceful living among people that have different cultures. Experience, however, has taught us that cultural diversity is expressed in the legal, cultural, and political arena, and that therefore the results of these expressions are dynamic and constructive processes that give birth to historical actors that in place produce rights, redefine identities, and produce their own history. In that process of dynamic construction, we have come to recognize that the discussion on cultural diversity have multiplied around the world, and that today we mostly understand the concept to refer to the multiplicity of ways in which cultures, groups of people, and societies express themselves within those boundaries, and the ways they use to transmit knowledge from generations to generations. Cultural diversity is posed to us as a doctrine to defend the creative capacity of tangible and intangible expressions of cultures that seek to preserve identity and dignity, but at the same time seek to promote harmonious relations of coexistence among individuals and groups from diverse backgrounds that share a common space. An important aspect that we need to bring to our attention is the fact that cultural changes are a result of the promotion and the defense of that diversity that get transformed into a political culture, that get manifested in many different forms, but that goes from the reconstruction of collective cultural identity to the creation of nation states, including the reform of the judicial system and the inclusions of sectors of society that have been historically excluded into that political culture. The regulation of the new social forms of relationships at the political, social, and economical level at the same time give way to a process that allows to rebuild the society and the state in a new way. This process of restructuring does not only change the state, but it also changes these actors within that state and the collective subjects that were at the heart of promoting that change. It is important to highlight that the recognition of ethnic and cultural diversity is not a rights-based transaction, but rather a process in which we are able to produce historical actors that are struggling against invisibility to which others have subjected them to within that state. In that process, we have produced theories and forms of organizing we have produced two in particular. One is the theory of feminism, and the other one is the culture of feminism. However, the dominant feminist paradigm is based on an unacknowledged model of center and periphery, in which this model, indigenous women, African descendant women, and poor women, and minority women occupy the periphery and must accept the ideas and conceptualization of feminism as defined by those at the center. In other words, we indigenous women are expected to accept the dominant picture of what constitutes women's oppression and women's liberation. The trouble is, this picture is only a partial match with our own experiences. Elements of our experience that do not match this picture are denied and marginalized. This dominant model tries to homogenize the women's movement, claiming that all women have the same demands and the same access to enjoyment of their lives. But this is a flawed assumption that denies the diverse cultural, linguistic, and social needs and visions of distinct groups of women that are part of this feminist movement. For indigenous women, human rights, women's rights, and the rights of indigenous people are intrinsically linked. To indigenous women who experience these elements of identity as an organic whole, this claim is obvious on a daily basis. However, to many feminists whose sole experience of oppression is on the basis of gender, this claim seems to require endless explanation. Even now, after decades of international participation of indigenous women, issues that are a matter of life and death for indigenous women, such as racism or the degradation of the Earth's resources, continue to be relegated or tagged to a conceptual category called diversity in the dominant feminist paradigm. In fact, the homogenizing tendency of the women's movement sometimes recreates the same framework of discrimination and cultural degradation through which national governments exploit indigenous people, especially indigenous women. Today, indigenous feminists argue that women have a vital role to play in the realization of alternative models of being in the world, and bring to our attention the need for a direct relationship between governance and spirituality that will allow us to plan our work in communities and bring us back to the values of feminism. Makira Stewart, a Maori indigenous woman who is very wise, noted that at any given time, by taking the level of feminist, we continue to face the risk of being dismissed as assimilated, and that taking any feminist position continues to be perceived as a demonstration of our lack of being indigenous within particular context in which we do our work. And it continues to be our challenge. Today, however, the promotion of a shift in paradigm based on indigenous feminism is to take the form of an overhaul. An overhaul that is both operative and normative in the human rights system, that it will relate to other aspects of our lives and at the same time will create a new form of building and constituting social movements. Indigenous feminists argue that rather than using a white or colonial theoretical approach, we can use feminist analysis as a tool for challenging racism and colonialism. To bring the theory of feminism down to the community, we need to confront the tension that exists between intercultural and multicultural policies. The concept of intercultural and multicultural are at the heart of many strategies, which means that the definition of both concepts is broadly discussed and agreed upon in different parts of the world. The notion of multiculturality in many cases is defined as the coexistence of different cultures within a given space. However, the strategy is broadly expanded to include the notion that this does not only include social dimensions, but also juridical aspects through specific programs created and managed by the state.